So today we have Tim Ferriss. He has a podcast. He has a famous book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and he's the opposite of Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule. His is, how do you become really proficient at something as quickly as possible. He's all about efficiency and maximizing your time and your focus and your concentration. So let's hear what he has to say, because I know if you're like me, you love shortcuts, right? Can I get to a certain place easier, shorter, faster, better? Let's see what he has to say.
Even if the data said for most people it takes 10,000 hours, well, for most people they do things the wrong way, or certainly at least it's true. It's true. I mean, because what choice do they have? They can't become an expert in everything. So what do? They look at what appears to have the most commercial success, like a Rosetta Stone, and they go buy Rosetta Stone. It's not the fastest way.
So Rosetta Stone is a language software, which helps you learn a language. And, so he's, you go to the mass marketed solution for something. And he's got a good point. I've done Rosetta Stone. I think a better way personally is just go to the country you're trying to learn the language and just immerse yourself. Like, I understand it might be a little more costly, or go to, if you're in America, there's definitely certain areas where you can speak to native speakers, whether you go to that church or you go to that community center, or take a class, and talk to the teacher. So, yeah, I agree. We don't always look for the best route. We might just look for the most commercial route, the most marketed, well adapted route to something.
One of the attractions of the 10,000 hours is I know what I'm doing now. I'm becoming an incredible violinist, and if I practice, I'll get to Carnegie Hall. This other thing is I'll just keep on learning. How are you finding that so far? You've been at it for 10 years or 15 years now of learn. Mm-hmm. What happens over that sequence of events for people like you who do that?
Yep.
So Tim Ferriss has a bunch of shows as well where he learns how to joust on a horse, or he learns how to harvest coconuts. So he does this. He actually has shows doing this, of just like trying something new, putting himself into a really hard, difficult, like Dirty Jobs. If you've ever seen that show, he goes into a situation that he knows nothing about and tries to learn it as fast as possible. So I think this question is really focusing on, hey, you've been doing this, throwing yourself in the deep end on learning something brand new all the time, and you've been doing this for over a decade, learning a bunch of different things. So how has it worked out for you?
Over time, I get better at acquiring skills. So the meta skill.
Right.
I think that if I'm applying my 10,000 hours towards anything, it's probably that. Like the Isaac Asimov, I don't know, I think it was Asimov who wrote like 15 million books. But at one point, I remember an interviewer asked him about one of the subjects he'd written about, and he had no idea. He couldn't answer it. And they go, well, you wrote a book about it. And he goes, I did, but I've written a lot of books. And they go, well, what are you an expert on? And he goes, I'm an expert at being an expert. For me, variety is the spice of life, and that doesn't mean that I shortchange myself. I mean, I feel like I can get to a very high level in these various fields in a relatively short period of time, certainly a year or less. And the incremental gains past that point are just not appealing to me. I think it's a very individual choice. If you are
Interesting. That's a really interesting concept. What does that mean to you? To me, I think that's really interesting, because let's just take flying an airplane, for example. Once you learn how to fly, and you can fly from point A to point B, you can take off, you can land. What he's saying is the incremental skills, learning certain safety maneuvers, trying maneuvers that are much more difficult to do, learning like this really hard to fly plane where the controls are backwards, and there's when you go into aviation, there's just so much to learn, right? Maybe he doesn't want to learn how to fly a helicopter, right? You can continue to evolve as a pilot or as an aviation expert, right? Or, a conductor. And he's saying, I like to learn the majority, the really strong basics. And then beyond that point, a lot of the advanced things that really don't come up very often, I'm not necessarily interested in learning that. And that's a fascinating perspective, right? I don't think one is right or wrong, but I think that's what he has to do in order to absorb so many things
through God-given skill capable of becoming the best in the world at X, I feel typically people know that early on. I mean, if you're Tiger Woods and you're instead of drawing pirate ships, you're drawing trajectories of different irons. I'm not kidding. I saw this drawing. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not normal. That's not normal. But for most people, I feel like they have the capacity to be exceptionally good in the top 5% in the world in many different areas, but they may not have or be able to identify the raw attributes that are going to push them into, bobsledding, because there are only so many things that you can try. And for me, I just to try to become, I could try to become perfect in Japanese, which of course will never happen because I won't be perfect in English. Or I could get to the point where I can converse like this in maybe 20 languages by the end of my life, and it's just more appealing.
Interesting. So it's interesting. He does have a podcast if you want to check him out. In a previous video, we looked at the 10,000 hour rule from Malcolm Gladwell's perspective. And, the way the title of this video was, it was like why he disagrees with the 10,000 hour rule. It seems like he agrees. He thinks that, it sounded like he thinks people do have a natural ability and they just have to find out what matches to that natural ability and they can become the best at something. But then he thinks that might be so hard to achieve that maybe the average person were better off learning a little bit about a lot, or even maybe more than a little bit, right? We learn enough to be good at it, not great, but good. And then that is a more fulfilling life as well. Now let's relate this to jobs, right? Especially, this is a business. I work in the business department. I think about, how do you turn the skill into money and how can it fuel your life? And I don't short side either the happiness level as well. We all want to live fulfilling lives as well, whether the fulfillment comes from our work or the money we generate or whatever, makes us happy. I do think though, with the current economy, people aren't working the same job 20, 30, 40 years unless you start your own business. And even then, a lot of people who are like entrepreneurs or start their own, they're often like do a lot of interesting things, right? They invest in multiple revenue streams. So I think that's actually not too bad of advice because you're going to be doing a lot in your lifetime. As I was alluding to, like my parents or my parents' parents might have worked the same job for 30 years with the same big company. Nowadays, I think the statistic is like the average person has 5 to 7 different careers, different job types. So now if the career is in a common industry, then I guess those skills kind of transfer over and you can get to that 10,000 hour rule and become an expert at it. But a lot of people as well are, learning a skill and kind of transitioning and learning that skill. So we do live in a world now where the 10,000 hour rule doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of people. And I think that's what he was getting at in the talk. But that's what I think. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. And that was Tim Ferriss on why he thinks the 10,000 hour rule doesn't work.